Live. There we go. It looks like the two people that are, well, there's only a small group watching us right now, so I'm going to wait a second, make sure that everyone has a chance. Let me
I'm
just
still not
check.
seeing anything on the YouTube link.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's reload that. Oh, here we come.
Hey!
Live. There we go. Okay, I can hear, so you have to turn that off, Django, so that it doesn't echo in. Two people.
Got it.
All right.
I just wanted to see that that was actually working.
Yeah,
All right.
it's a minute now. Okay.
Hello, the internet.
Yes. I guess I'm gonna do. I realize that there's gonna be people joining off and on, but this is all gonna be recorded, so we're just gonna go straight through right now and see how it goes.
When I clicked on the YouTube thing, it started at the beginning, so.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So, hi everyone. My name is Seth Fishman. I'm here as a stretch goal of $125,000, which makes me feel quite loved and needed, to speak to you about how to find a literary agent, how to write a query letter. I am both a writer of young adult fiction and also an agent. I've been an agent for 10 years. I work at a company called the Gernert Company, and some of the books that I represent include XKCD, What If, and Volume 0. I represent the guy who created the Cronut, Chef Dominique Ancel. This is called The Secret Recipes. Fantastic. Enjoy it. Oops. I represent, let's see, everyone knows Ann Leckie. This is Ancillary Sword. Hugo, Nebula, and Arthur C. Clarke Award.
Everything. She just won everything.
I represent The Tiger's Wife by Thea Albrecht, more literary bent. And finally, another web-oriented fun thing, Kate Beaton, Hark a Vagrant, just to show a little rundown of some of the books that I represent. One of the other authors I represent, and we're going to start with that, is a guest that I have here, is an author named Django Wexler, best name ever. He wrote the Flintlock fantasy book called The Thousand Names. The Shadow Throne is book 2 that's just out right now. This is a fantastic and wonderful book. He also wrote a middle grade series. The first one, this is actually a galley, so it's that's what all I had at home. It's called The Forbidden Library for your kids, which is fantastic as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to give the floor to Django right now, and then I'll take all the way over to talk about his query process, what he went through. But before we go through all that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about World Builders, which is what this is all about. World Builders is a fantastic fundraising organization, charity organization that is through Heifer International, where you can, sort of gather money and donate various animals to various places that might subsist better with that. In other words, a chicken to one place that can have eggs and raise the chickens, or I always donate a sheep a year. I don't know, I'm sheep oriented, to a place that can use it for milk and for shearing and various other things. It's a fantastic cause, and you should join, and you should donate. And there's a lot of wonderful other things that you could potentially get, up to $100,000 worth of books that are there, and lottery-oriented things. So go check that out at World Builders. And so now let's start. Let's turn it over to Django. Django, how are you doing?
Hi.
Let's talk a little bit about your process. A little short rundown on what it was like finding an agent.
All right. So I'm Django Wexler. I wrote the books that Seth talked about. So was it 2012 that you and I, or 2011 that you and I got together?
I think it was 11. I think it was 11.
End of 2011. So I've been writing a long time, and I actually had 2 books out with a small press, which never went anywhere, and I never saw anything, basically. And then I determined that this time I was going to do it right. I was going to get an agent. I was going for a major publisher. So the first thing I did was write a book, which took a long time. And then once I thought the book was in a reasonable state, I wrote a query letter and a synopsis, which took even longer because those are horrible, as I'm sure Seth will show you later. My query letter was not exactly the best query letter in the, history of query letters. I relied for help on that. There's a lot of good websites if you search for this sort of thing. I used one called agentquery.com, but there's nothing particularly unique about it. Writer's Market is an old standard. And they have both sort of help on the kind of things you should be doing, what goes into a synopsis, what goes into a query letter, etc., and also big lists of agents. So I made a list of agents that I thought would take this book, that would, represent this kind of thing. Getting the genre right is something that seems really important, and it seems kind of easy, but a lot of agents I follow on Twitter complain that they're constantly getting queries for the wrong genres that they don't represent, which seems like an easy fix. Anyway, I made a list of about 50 agents, and I queried them all, essentially.
That's a lot of agents.
It's not a lot compared to some people.
Yeah.
Importantly, I queried them one at a time, not just a giant mass email to 50 people labeled "to whom it may concern." I modified my query letter for each one, saying, here's the books you represent, this is why I think this would be a good fit for you, et cetera, et cetera. I think my record on someone getting back to me was I got one rejection in 17 minutes. And I guess the other record, the other way, is still going, because some of them just never got back to me. I got maybe 10 people who asked to read more, and out of those, 2 who were interested in representation, although ultimately the path to my signing up with Seth was a little more complicated, because he sent me a rejection the first time around.
That's right,
nice
guys.
rejection.
I rejected him the first time around. We'll talk about that in a minute.
And but it turns out that I got another chance at him, and as he tells you, he was in a kind of a different place in his career and looking to acquire things, and that it clicked for him the second time. So that's my story. It's really kind of like depressingly simple and boring, I guess. Like, there's no, I met Seth on the train into the city and saved his life from a hobo or anything. It's just sent out letters.
I actually disagree. I think that your story is unique, and it provides a really good opportunity to talk about some of the do's and don'ts of finding an agent. I definitely don't reject most of the people that I end up representing.
I suppose that's almost a tautology.
Yeah. So this opportunity, what happened with Django is very interesting. And Django, thank you for being here, and definitely jump in with comments about this.
Okay.
But there's a lot more to his story than he was mentioning, because during the time that he was doing this, first of all, the 1,000 names right here. That's a very long book, and it was significantly longer, and we'll talk about that too. So
I had a lot of people.
He wrote this book. It took a long time. It was the first in a 5-book series, and during the time to send it and submit it, how long did it take you, Django, to get before we signed? Like, how many months was that?
Starting counting from when?
From when you first started submitting to agents.
Oh, about 6 months.
Right, 6 months is a long time, and I think in that time period he wrote this. A little bit longer than that. A little bit longer.
Because that was from the point at which I stopped working on 1,000 Names to the point at which Penguin picked up 1,000 Names, so more like 9 months. But yeah.
So right, about 9 months. So in that entire process, Django was able to write a middle grade book, which Django's a fast writer, but in other words, it takes a long time. So let's talk a little bit let's go right into the query letter, and we'll talk about what Django did. He was so very kind, very brave, that he is going to, he gave me his original query letter, which I'm going to screen share with everyone right now.
For those of you who haven't written a query letter, this is kind of like being asked to show my dirty underwear on screen.
So you can see it right now, Django?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I want to use this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about how you should write a query letter. I'm going to pull away from this fairly soon, but take a look at it. You see that there's an address that I, took away because I don't want you to see his address.
I actually forgot to do that, so if it had been up to me, you would all know where I live.
But in general, you can see that what there are sort of 3 breakdowns here. You have the intro line, you have the synopsis, and then you have a conversation a little bit about himself, and then we pull away here. I'm going to tell you what happened. One of the reasons why I ended up passing on Django is that when he sent it to me, I was in a place where I had taken on a few clients, and I really wanted to focus on my clients. And it's important to remember that agents need and want to focus on their clients. And if they're sort of overwhelmed at a particular moment, they don't want to take on more projects. And so when I saw Django's, I noticed a few things, most specifically the 216,000 words, very long. And not that I don't love long books, but at that time I was certainly overwhelmed, and that would have been a hard thing. And the other thing is, let's talk a little bit about, this is for a lot of the viewers here, sci-fi is very similar, literary is less so. But in fantasy and sci-fi, the synopsis, we do know, we're familiar with the way that it works. But if you look at his synopsis for what's going on, you can see what's going on, but it's also in this world that you don't understand, that you don't have a good context, that the world build, there's no way that an author of fantasy or sci-fi can give you some strong world build in the middle of this synopsis. And also, it's very much known that authors are not very good at they're good at writing, but they're not necessarily good at writing their own synopses for things. Now, I think Django actually did a pretty good job at it. But those are things that stand out. And so what happened to me is that I actually didn't read one page of Django's book. Django's book was fantastic, and I just was at a place as an agent, and it's important to remember that agents are like this. Sometimes they're just not able to take on something. So I ended up passing on it for a few of those things alone, and when it came back around to me through actually a recommendation of someone, I connected with Django, told him I'm sorry I had passed on it. I had some space right now. And I remember reading the first page and being really, really sure of Django's writing, and was able to move directly on from that. And I missed a subway stop for it. We ended up cutting. How much did we cut it by? 60, 70,000 words.
Are you crazy? Do you really want me to tell this story?
100,000. How many words?
When I sent it to you, you sent me back notes, and we added 20,000 words because the version we sent to Jess was 230,000 because you said, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. It's gonna be a long book, might as well add some stuff.
Yeah.
And we ended up cutting about 30 or 40,000 from the finished version with my editor Jess Wade at Penguin.
Right, and that's really important to talk about in terms of one of the things. We'll get to some specifics on it, but in a query letter, I really would recommend not putting how long the book is. I don't do it when I tell editors when I'm submitting something, and Django's wondering why. But the reason why is because it doesn't really add anything. I'm going to tell you right now as a caveat. Plenty of agents might disagree with me here, but I'm very sure that this is correct, and you should listen to everything I have to say. The thing is that a lot of people read what they're reading. They're not printing things out anymore. I do print things out sometimes, but I usually print things out when I know I'm editing. But when I'm reading on submission, I read a lot of things on my e-reader. And if they just download a full 230,000 words onto your e-reader and you don't tell them about it, then they get halfway through and they're either hooked or they're not hooked. And they get annoyed that it's long, but they don't get annoyed that it's good. And that is something that happens. If your book has to be long, I would actually very sincerely recommend. In fact, I do not want to know how long your book is if it's long.
So you wouldn't say, like, if someone didn't put their word count, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, how long is this? It's 1,000,000 words?
No, not at all. Not at all. And if the thing is that if you get to a point, if you're halfway into a book and it says, and it's it's 1,000,000 words, and I'm loving it, and I'm like, how long is this? And you scroll ahead, then I have the choice. Like, I can delete it right there. We definitely have some books where this conversation comes into play, but I think that you should keep your book in a certain length. Don't be crazy about it. But I also think you don't need any reason to scare the agent away, and that is what we're going to talk about here. So here is what we're going to. So you saw the query letter. I'm going to show you guys first. What I'm going to talk about is how to write a query letter, and then I'm going to talk about sort of what you should be looking for in an agent, and also some do's and don'ts. Now, you can definitely ask me questions. You can use the hashtag I have on my thingamajigger, and you can put it in the comments.
Is
on
that
the YouTube
hashtag
page.
Ask Seth Most Anything? It's kind of blurry on my screen.
Yes, ask Seth most anything. Ask Seth
Got it.
is fine. And you put it in the comments, and I'll answer them, but I'll answer them at the end of the session. So feel free to start putting those in there. So I'm going to hold this up to the screen. Hold on a second. Can you see? There's the query letter. This is what I think about the query letter. I think it should be 3 paragraphs. How in the world am I going to get this so that you can see it all? There. Okay. I'll zoom in a little bit. But a query letter, in my mind, this is one of the things that Django did wrong. Not a big deal, but it's okay. Is that you need? I think there should be 3 paragraphs. That's all it should be. Less is more here. The whole point of the query letter is to try to get me to get to the next page, to get to your actual book. Because if I had read Django, if I had looked at the first page of Django's book, it wouldn't have been a problem. We would be working together much earlier. So here's what we got here. The first paragraph is about what are you writing to? Sorry, what did I even say? Why are you writing to me? Why are you writing to me? The second paragraph is what's your book about? And that's a little longer. And the third one is why do I care about you? So let's talk a little bit about the first one right here. What's really important about the first one, and all Django wrote, if I recall, is something along the lines of, I'm seeking representation for my fantasy novel, Janice. That's not going to do it. What you want in that first line is you want to get off the slush pile. Slush pile, if you don't know, is the pile. I get 50, 60 queries a week. Most of the time, your queries are being read by an assistant or an intern, not even by the agent. And the way that you get to the agent is to have something in that first paragraph that connects you to me. And there's a number of ways to do that. Most notably is the obvious, which is you are connected to me in some way. For instance, I'm doing this right now. If you wrote to me and you said, I saw your Google Hangout on World Builders, I thought you said some really smart things, and I really liked your shirt, then that's something that's going to make me pay a little bit more attention to you. Or say I taught it, I spoke somewhere, something else like that. You read my Reddit online, you did some research, something that shows you did some research. Django did do the research, but you want those lead-ins. The other 2 really important ways to do is to connect to clients. If you said something like, I read 1,000 Names by Django Wexler, and I think that book is phenomenal. I'd love to work with someone who represents that kind of writing. That would be something that shows that you're connecting me to that person. You're also flattering me, and we're human. But for me, it's a little bit more that you're doing the research. Because in my experience, anyone who does a well-researched query letter is someone that is going to do better with their novel too. More research, more effort, more what's it called? The way that you find. So say you have a book that you love and you're looking for an agent. You're looking for an agent. You go to the books that you love. And do 2 things. Find the books that you that are most like your book, and that's one way to do it. And say, hey Seth, the thousands. I write epic flintlock fantasy, and I have a book that since you represent 1,000 names, I think that you would like to take a look at. Or the other is again just the straight up flattery. I love The Tiger's Wife. It's one of my favorite books. I'd love to connect with you. So the way that you find someone is that you take a book. So we all know Mr. Patrick Rothfuss here. You pick up this most recent book, and you go to the acknowledgments. Now, this is an odd book. This is book 3 and sort of a little different part of the series and a little standalone, so it's hard to find it. But he does have, if you look in the back, there's the name. When I finished on page 156, when it was finished, I sent it to my agent, Matt. Now, there was no last name, but there's a potential that you can Google and find who his agent is, Matt Bialer, who's a nice, really wonderful guy. Or you can realize that this is book 2 or 3, and you go find book 1 and look in the back of the book, and you will find in the acknowledgments the name of the agent, and use that to connect to the person. That's the way that is the most effective in connecting to your agent. Now, in that line, a lot of people say that's where I'm supposed to say how long the book is. I say do not say that. So that's up to you, but I don't. I mean, again, the point is you're trying to get to the next page, so you don't want anything to trip up. And I'm going to talk about more do's or don'ts later, but don't have crazy fonts. No need for everything in italics. No need to pull a excerpt from the novel and put it before the first line to show me something exciting. That's not going to turn anyone on. What we want to do is see that you are connecting me for some reason, and that you're connecting for some reason, and that you know about me and know what you're doing. So I'm going to give, I'm going to dig all the way in, but I've used Django here, so here I'm going to say goodbye to my dear friend and wonderful writer. If you haven't read his books, yes, you should go read them.
All right. Thank you, everybody. If you're looking for me, just look at Django Wexler. That's with a D, DJANGOWEXLER.com, and then all my contact info, Twitter, etc. is on there. Thanks, FS, and definitely help out world builders. It's a great cause.
And last question for you, Django.
Yeah, what's up?
What would you say is the biggest advice you give to an inspiring writer?
You have to keep writing. The thing that I see trip a lot of aspiring writers up is that they finish a book and they're like, okay, now the next step is publication. And I'm like, well, the next step is probably writing another book first, and then maybe another one and another one. The 1,000 Names, depending on how you count and what you include, was probably my 8th or 9th finished book.
Yeah.
And going back to 1999 or something. So. Yeah. It may take several tries at that, and that seems harsh, and of course there are some people who just write one brilliant book and it becomes a huge success, but it's not the average case. So if you think your book's good, send it to agents and stuff, but don't just like stop writing and sit there and wait. You start something else and work on a new project, which is what I did. That's how we ended up with Forbidden Library.
Absolutely. Fantastic, Django. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I'm signing off. Have fun, everybody.
Bye. So speaking to Django, I mean, as a writer myself, I have 3 books in drawers before my first one was published as well. So again, this is very good advice. Got to keep working on it. Okay, so we're back to the query letter, and we have looked at paragraph 1, very short, 1 to 2 lines. That's it. And now we have, what's your book about? So this is going to be a little bit controversial, but again, I care way more about your writing than your ability or inability to write a synopsis about your own book, which I think is very, very difficult to do. I do not think you should write multiple paragraphs there. It's definitely doable. There's exceptions to the rules, but I think you should get in and out, maybe 2 paragraphs at most, and be succinct. Don't be crazy. Don't compare your book to. I mean, you want to compare your book accurately to different people. They're called comp titles, but you don't want to do it to the biggest and the best in the world, because then we'll roll our eyes. Like if you say this is Harry Potter meets Neil Gaiman meets J.R.R. Tolkien, then I'll roll my eyes. Even though if someone actually did give me that book, I would be incredibly excited. But we just don't believe you. And that sounds mean, but it's what we want is you to come up with like an intelligent, realistic comp title if you want to do that. In general, what your book about should really be, I mean, it's the longest chunk because you're talking about your synopsis of your book, but it really should just be in and out, little base about what the book is, your main characters. You don't have to give away all the plot. If I don't think you need to do that. And here's the controversial thing is that I almost never read them. In fact, if you know how sometimes query letters, they want you to do a 6-page synopsis afterwards. I don't read those either. You should follow the rules, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So if someone does want that, you should do that. However, I usually start here, go to here, the 3rd paragraph, which I'll talk about in a second, and then go straight to the manuscript, because that's what I want to care about. I want to know why you're writing to me, and I want to know who you are, and why do I care about you, and then I want to go read the manuscript, because I know how hard it is to write this. These are really hard to do. Not to say you should, call it in, but I don't think you need to go crazy right here. Just make it simple, make it clear, and get out of there. Don't scare us away. Okay, so here we are with the 3rd one. Why do I care about you? Now, this is very important. I'm going to tell you quite honestly that if you have nothing special to your bio, that's totally fine. We look at everything, and if you have a good, if you have a good book, we care about that, and that's what matters. Nevertheless, there is a distinct amount of growth in terms of care to what goes on in that bio page. Major things are short stories or that have been published. In the sci-fi fantasy world, that's a huge deal. Everyone, takes care of themselves in that world. If you've been published in anything, even something small, let me know. Now, if you've been published in 50 things, I don't want you to list all 50 things. But if you've been published in 5 things and all of them are small, that's okay to share 2 or 3 or even 5 of them with me. It shows me that you've been trying and that you're putting effort into it and that you're really building yourself up and you're taking it seriously. And I think that's a really important thing. And how do you find, by the way, how you find short stories is there's a number of ways or places to send to. There's a number of online avenues or places to submit your stories to. But I think a great thing to do is to look in anthologies and reprint anthologies and see where the short stories that are involved there, where they've been published before, and connect to those places in sort of a similar way as you might approach us. So the other things that matter are, Django had books published. That's great. Awards obviously are important. Where you studied for your MFA matters, but a lot of people have MFAs right now. Not to say, I have an MFA, so it's not a bad thing. But I'm saying, like I haven't taken on anyone from. I've taken on some people from Iowa, but most of the things that come straight from there, that's the best program in the world. It isn't necessarily anything better than from a number of the places. In fact, I think the best school for education for writing that I know of is sci-fi fantasy based Clarion West. I haven't gotten much from the other Clarion, which I'm sure is just as good, but Clarion West, I represent a lot of people from there. I think they're fantastic, and if you tell me that you went to Clarion, I really, really will perk up. So that really matters. Sorry for that. So that's really important. And the final other thing is that, I want you to tell me a bit about yourself. You don't have to go on and on about it. It's nice to know a little bit about where you are and what you're up to. What is important is that if you're writing a book about coal miners miners on asteroids in space, and you happen to be, an engineer or a miner or something that directs connects, let me know. I want to know that there's some, strong accuracy to that. Again, that's not a backbreaker. That's just something that's really interesting. But if you, are a banker and you are writing about that, then you can certainly tell me. I'm just saying the interest and the connection is not as much there, so it's not as important. I hope that makes sense. So this is the base, this is the base query letter. I think, again, you just want to make it very simple. You want to get out of there. Let's talk about some do's and don'ts about that. You're definitely going to want to make sure that you address it to the right person on the top. Find out if they're a male or a female. That's a huge problem. Don't say Mrs. Seth Fishman. It happens all the time. It happens to complicated names all the time. Don't attach a picture of yourself. I appreciate it, but we don't need it. It happens all the time. Like I said, no sections, no little runs of the book there. Let me see here. I have some things. I think a lot of people talk about how, I remember when I was applying to college a long time ago, people talked about the creative ways to apply to colleges. Oh, in lieu of this application, I just submitted my novel, or I just submitted a play I wrote. Those things don't really work. And I think for most of the time, trying to be really creative or different on the query letter doesn't work. What I think really does work is when you do that again within the pages. So definitely try to get there. The other thing is if you're doing it electronically, which a lot of queries are electronic nowadays, make sure you don't CC everyone or make it sort of nondescript. So many times we get queries that link in all the other agents around town, and I kind of want to write back and be like, pass. Instead we just delete it. And I think that's a little bit harsh in some ways, but I think it's really, really, really important to remember that agents are busy and humans too, and we want to, we put a lot of work into this. We care about this. We want to think that you do too, and I know that you've written a book and that took a long time, but I also want you to know that it takes a long time to read your book. It takes a long time to interact with you on it. We work on spec. So it takes, real risk for us to work with you, and we want to have that sort of dual relationship between the two, which means that you do the research to sort of care and work about that with us. Um, Something that's really important is that almost every agency, and you should do this, go to their website, they have query rules. Usually it's submit 3 chapters and a synopsis and the query letter. That's, I think, what ours says. I'm telling you personally, I read that first and third paragraph and then go straight to the other, straight to the meat of it. But make sure you follow the rules, because people are looking for an excuse to not do work. Again, we're talking about the assistants who are great, interns who are great, but they are looking for every reason to move on. And we read 1 page, we read 5 pages. It's sort of naive to think that we read much more than that, unless you should give me a reason otherwise, which would be that again, you show me that you care and that you work really hard on presenting the book, and you do it well. So that's really important. And now, let's see, I'm trying to think about before I go to questions. Oh yeah, so there's a really big thing that is a rule that I say that you should break, and I am very, very serious about this. I think a few of you are not going to believe me about this as well, but you should always do multiple submissions, simultaneous submissions to multiple agents. Some places will ask for exclusives. That's crazy. That's someone trying to take advantage of you. That's someone trying to sort of steal you. Even if they're a big agent, you got to really think about it. Like, you're going to go with someone who is really trying to take advantage of you out of the gate? What you really want to do is you want to connect to as many places as possible and just be honest with them. So if you submit to a lot of places, I don't even really need to know that. What I need to know is if someone asks for a full manuscript, or if someone asks you for representation, then you let everyone know. You know what? That's a bargaining tactic. You should be doing that, because I am going to put your thing, take it right out of the dust pile, put it right on top, and take a look at it. Even if it's not for me, I'll still take a quick look at it. And because we don't want to miss anything. And that's really, really, really important. That, this is really unfair to you. If it takes some agents, it takes 3 months to get back to you. If you're waiting 3 months, that's just incredibly unfair. You should submit, maybe 10 at a time, and you should do that. And again, some people will say, oh, I want an exclusive, so on and so forth. No, that is totally inappropriate in my mind. And one of the things that you have to really remember, and this is going to lead right into what you're looking for in an agent, is that you're looking for someone to work for you. It's a weird balance of power that exists, whereby the agent has all the power until the moment, probably the moment a little bit past the point of selling your book, or the book becomes big or whatnot. I admit it might be a little bit further in there, but we work for you. You pay us, and you just have to remember that the relationship with the agent needs to be something that is one where no one's really taking advantage of each other, that you're really working together. So what are you looking for in an agent? Now, I'm going to try and be brief about this. It's 9 o'clock. Okay, so I'll try and go on for a couple minutes about this. So you're looking for a number of things in an agent. There's a lot of different types of agencies out there. What you most want to find in an agent is someone who likes the books that you write, and who's at an agency who's equipped to deal with it. So my agency, the Gerner Company, we have a foreign rights department. You should ask an agent about their foreign rights department, where we sell our books abroad for you. You should ask about an agent's connection to Hollywood, how they do that. A big place like WME, they have their own film and TV department, which can be good or bad. It's really great if they're really behind your stuff, and if they're not behind it, then you can maybe follow the ball bottom of the pile. So that's a risk, and I know because I was represented by WME. Or the Gerner Company, we specifically find co-agents in Hollywood, and we directly link to them. So a lot of places do that kind of thing. You should ask about short stories. Say you write short stories. What is your agent's role with that? For my literary clients, I sell a lot of their short stories. For my sci-fi and fantasy, you have connections on your own. I'll sell them if you need to, but if you don't, then you can continue to sell. You should ask about percentages. The percentages need to be the same. Some people offer different percentages. It's 15% for domestic. That is domestic. That's all contracts on U.S. stuff. That's film is also should be 15%. merchandise, all that kind of stuff. Foreign is 20%. The reason why it's 20% is because we have people on the ground, say in China, and they get 10% and we get 10%. So we actually get less, but it's 20% overall because we got to pay those people abroad who are doing the on-the-ground work for us. So that's really important to think about and to ask them about. And one thing, everyone talks about sort of editors. Editors are incredibly important. But editors switch houses. Editors move around. And when you sell a book, you're actually selling a book, even though I submit it to an editor, I'm selling it to a publisher. When the editor leaves, the book stays there. And hopefully it's being taken care of. Good publishers will do that. But your editor comes and goes. Your agent stays. And you want to find a relationship that sort of goes on forever. So I've worked for 5 years at a place called Sterling Lord and Aristic before I went over to the Gurner Company where I am now, and I took every single client with me. And I could do that, and they all wanted to come with me. They literally had to fire Sterling Lord and Aristic and come with me. And that's because you develop a relationship with those people. So they've been to my wedding. I mean, this is an important thing. We're going to be around forever with each other. So you want to find someone who gets your writing, ask for edits, ask what they think about your book. If they can't tell you what they think about your book, then how are they going to be a good editor? Ask about what they think about publication of the book and marketing and all that kind of stuff, how they deal with that, how involved they want to be. I like to be incredibly involved with my clients from the beginning. And I think that makes me a better agent. And so I have my own connections to a lot of different people and places, and like to pitch my own client stuff there. And I think it's great fun to do, and also adds value to what you're up to. So that's a lot of things I've just talked about. Let me look. I have a little note for myself. So let me just see really quickly. Is there anything else that I missed here? Also, remember, of course, to donate to World Builders. We'll talk a little bit again and more about that. Okay, that's pretty much it. The only other thing I'll say before we go into questions is I think it's really important. A lot of people talk about the doomsday of the publishing industry, self-publishing versus traditional publishing, so on and so forth. There's back and forth about those kind of things, but I think it's really important for you to know that publishing, I think, is doing pretty well. I mean, I think there's some midlist issues, but there's been that for a little bit. There's been certainly some formatting problems, but if you give me a book and the book's good, I'm selling it, and they do okay. Not everything does okay, but there's still a really vibrant market. Publishers actually are making tons of money on ebooks, and they have the money to spend and to support you. And it's all about being with an agent who can guide you to the correct publisher and correct editor to take you to that next level. So with that, I wish you guys the best of luck, especially finishing up our monthly writing project. Of course, remember, it's okay if you don't finish this month. Send it along. I look forward to it. Now we got about 15-20 minutes to answer some questions. So in order to do this, I'm going to look at comments and answer based off of those. So we'll go for there. Hold on one second. My parents are calling from Midland, and they have no idea. I'm from Midland, Texas, and they have no idea I'm on Google Hangout. Okay, so here we go. First question from Nick Crone. How important is it that I stick seriously to my genre? In other words, my novel is basically flintlock fantasy, but all my short stories ideas are sci-fi. Is that important, or do I need to come up with some short stories in the same genre? That's a great question. Well, I think a lot of people really diversify, and I think diversification is actually pretty good. It allows you to sort of grow over time into various things. Django, for instance, flintlock fantasy, but he wrote this fantasy middle grade book that I was able to publish, and now he has 2 books coming out a year. And specifically to you, Nick, representing Ann Leckie, most of Ann's short stories, or a lot of her short stories rather, are fantasy, and her Ancillary Justice, which is what she's known for now, is hard sci-fi. So one day we'll come back to the fantasy, but her short stories are there, and they're perfectly fine, and it's good to be in that world. So I think that's totally fine. You're absolutely right, of course, that maintaining a world build theme is something that can be beneficial to you, but it's no major deficit. Excuse me. Is it okay, from Widow of Sirius? Is it okay to say that you are approaching an agent because you enjoy the books they represent, even if you don't write in that genre per se? Yeah, I definitely think it is. I mean, I think it's important that you make a distinction, but in some ways, I find those to be almost more touching. If you tell me, one of my favorite books is, or I love this book here, so on and so forth. I love the range. A lot of people like my I represent a lot of web comics. You're not writing web comics, but if you tell me you like Kate Beaton, that shows me a lot about you, even if you're not doing web comics. So that's absolutely fine. Um, I think that is absolutely fine. Let me refresh. Don't know if we have any more questions right now. Look, okay. Here we go. You mentioned letting agents know where you attained your MFA. Would someone such as yourself pass a writer up simply because they did not get a creative writing degree? That's a great question, and the truth of the matter is absolutely not. Lots of people that I represent don't have MFA degrees, and I think MFA degrees have a lot of pluses and minuses. I mean, I think MFA programs sort of push people a little bit cookie cutter in some ways. And there are people who break out of that, but there are a lot of, I mean, us agents often talk about, oh, it's a typical MFA book. And you know what? A lot of good writing are MFA books, but they're just sort of very stereotypical kind of writing about very stereotypical kind of things. And no, I don't take points off at that at all. That's a good question. Um, from Elwin, is there a difference between writing query letters for novels versus graphic novels or comics? Oh, that's a great question. That's a whole nother big thing, so we're not going to get all the way into it, but the truth of the matter is, yes. When I submit a graphic novel or a comic to publishers, I need a decent amount of material. I need a full script. I need character sketches. I need at least 5 full pages well done of the art from it. Ideally, you want it all, and the reason why you want it all is because publishers want it all. The more, the merrier. In fact, I can sell something on a partial, sure, but I'll give you less money and less enthusiasm from the publisher and less publishers bidding. The way things work is the more work you put into it, the more comes out of it. And so if you're going to send a comic or graphic novel, it's just harder, significantly harder if you don't have the art to it. Even if you're not the artist, it's way, way easier to submit an artist-writer combo. And at the least I can see some of the work that you do there. So that's a good question, but it's very hard. Okay, that's not a question, Tawny, but I really appreciate your kind comment. Let me refresh one more time and see if we have something else here. Okay, here we go. An agent says he likes my novel, but he wants me to rewrite. Do I rewrite the novel for one agent? I feel like that could loop me into a never-ending process. That's a great, everyone's asking great questions. So sometimes I get a book that I think is very good. The writing is good, but there's some major, perhaps fatal flaws. I think that sometimes I don't feel like I'm ready. Sometimes I'm ready. I'm like, you know what? We can get there. This author, I trust that person, and I just take that person on and we work on it until it gets there. But because sometimes you work really hard and you don't get there with an author, I ask for edits, and I give them the option. If they want to do them, then they can do them. And because there's a lot of other agents out there, so you shouldn't just go ahead and do a major edit on spec. You should do an edit if you believe and agree with the edit. That's how you should do it. So every time, even when I'm taking someone on, I make sure that they know my edits and they can hear what I care about and what I think about their work, so they know what it's like to work with me. And so it's a bit of a risk. At the same time, I have definitely taken on people who I've done those things with. Again, Ancillary Justice is a very perfect example of that. Here we have a question over on the side panel, so I'm going to look and see what that question is. If I were to get a request for a partial, would that warrant alerting other agents I've submitted to, or would that be reserved for full and actual offers of representation? I think it's worth, you're your own agent until you get an agent. And if we have someone who's interested in reading the book that we have sent out in any way, shape, or form, I let other people know. Now, I don't lie. That's what's important. You just got to be honest above board here. But I definitely let people know when there's interest. A lot of the reason why is because they're just on the bottom of piles. Things can be disappeared. If you come to me with interest, then that will provoke interest on this side things too. Question. Francisco, as an agent, do you suggest pseudonyms instead of real names for a book? And so, what cases? That's really up to you. It's honestly, it totally is. I've worked with a couple with pseudonyms. Pseudonyms are actually pretty tough to make sure that they are sort of kept up the whole way through. But there's a lot of reasons why people do pseudonyms, and I'm fine with it either way. Yeah, I'm fine with it either way. Let's see. Another question. Will you consider an author with a new novel if you rejected their previous submissions? Yes, I will. And what's funny is that if you tell me that I rejected your previous stuff, I don't know if that's going to help you out, but I don't know if I would remember necessarily your previous stuff. So I'm just trying to be really honest with you here. It might be best to not even say that I rejected your stuff, and just submit again to me, because again, we read so many things, we reject for so many reasons. It's really important to remember agents are people too. So if you query me on a bad day or a day I'm overwhelmed, like Django did, then I might pass on you. If you query me when I was a young assistant and I had like a very all the time in the world, I didn't understand why my boss said that they were too busy sometimes to take on certain new material. But I get it now, and the reason why is because it's important for me to be there for my clients, and sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. So so remember what it's all about. That you're connecting to a person and not a robot. Jack B, should we be looking for publishers within our own country? Is there any reluctance to represent someone who works in a different time zone? Okay, time zone, no, that's not a problem. I don't think you're meaning time zone because you said country, but time zone is not an issue. Out of the country is a little bit harder. It's not a no at all. It just creates a few obstacles. I mean, if you're in the UK or a British territory, then it's better for your career, most usually, to publish first there, or to rather get an agent and go through there. And I know this from experience. I know this from dealing with that. If you're in France and you write in English and you're going to be looking to publish in the States alone, sure, I'll take a look. If you're in Canada, absolutely, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Okay, new question. I've been told that you should always tell an agent that the manuscript is complete. Thoughts? What if you were already way ahead of the game and are planning a trilogy, let's say, and you finished the first and are already working on the second? Will broad scope increase your chances of getting picked up? That's a great question. First of all, I would absolutely only send complete manuscripts. Never start a query. Say you like page 60 best as well. Don't start with page 60. I don't care. I'll throw it right away. Because when you pick up a book, you don't start on page 60. You start on page 1, and page 1 has to make it. It's important. It's okay to say. In fact, it's definitely okay to say if this is a trilogy, first book of a trilogy, say that. However, if you have 3 books in a trilogy and 3 other books somewhere else and another book somewhere else, or even just 2 books that are totally different, pick one book, and query that one book. Only talk about that one book. Get the agent connected to that one book. Pick your best project, the one that you care about the most, and go with that and build out later. If you talk about too many other books, you'll scare an agent away because the same thing I was talking about 200,000 words. If you're telling me you have 2 books, then we're talking about more than that in terms of word count, and then also sort of a whole headache. Because what if one book is really bad? What if I don't like one book? So that's a whole other thing. Sorry for drinking a lot. I'm talking a lot. All right, let's see here. Adric says, I may be an odd duck here in that I actually work for an indie publishing company. However, I'm also a writer, and marketing and selling my work is not my forte. Do you feel like there's a middle ground between indie publishing and traditional where an agent is still beneficial? Yeah, I mean, I think that, and you can count me wrong here, but I think even even the big self-published authors find an agent at some point. Agents do a lot of things, like I said, from being another eye to helping you market and publicize your book to helping you mainly sell abroad in Hollywood. Those are really big deals to do. I represent a guy named Jason Gurley who had a book called Eleanor, which self-published very recently, sold 10,000 copies in the month before I took his book out to sell. However, him and I were working on edits the whole time, and then we went out with that book and we sold it. I think so. In other words, he was doing okay. He was doing fine. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of place for agents in the middle. If you're doing only self-published stuff and you don't want to do anything beyond, you're not going to. Not every agent's going to want to work with you, but you're going to want to find the right agent. I think agents earn their 15%. Any agent can sell a good book. Now, not any agent can sell a good book to the right publisher or the right editor, but I think that most agents earn their 15% for everything that happens after the book is sold. Another question. I tend to write in non-genre specific areas. Can't figure out what kind of writer I want to be just yet. It's difficult to know what type of agents to submit to. Any suggestions for searching for that right agent? I think it's about finding the agent who represents the books that you like. It's also important that you figure out what kind of writer you are. I mean, you can write across the world, but unfortunately, it's a business, and it's helpful to know where you want to focus in terms of doing this. And realize, like, if you publish a book like Django's, Django can come to me with an adult literary novel, and I can try and sell that, and I can. I think you do a great job with that, but that would sort of compete with the epic fantasy, and so we'd want to be political about it. We want to be careful, want to be thoughtful about it. You got to think about those kind of things. Is there a kiss of death genre that should not be mentioned in query letter? No, but you should know your audience. So, like, if you send me a romance query, I don't do romance. I don't do a few different things. And so, if you sent me something, you said, for example, our epic dinosaur erotica when pitching a hard sci-fi anthology. A little confusing there, but yeah, you should just know who you're sending things to. I also like humor and jokes, but in query letters they often come off sort of weird. So again, you try and get in and out. And I think that's probably the most important thing for you to be doing. All right, let's see here. Let me see what else we got here. Loading. Got some more questions. 1 second. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. I have heard that if the manuscript you are trying to publish is too long, most would not even take a chance on it. I could see why. But would you have any advice for someone whose first manuscript is likely to be large, say 200,000 words? Well, I told you about this already. First of all, you don't tell anyone about this. You don't tell anyone about how long your manuscript is. And second of all, you're going to edit it down or break it up at some point in time. They're really long books, and it's a challenge. I mean, you know that. It's a choice you're making, and publishing costs are part of it, but maintaining a readership for that length is really difficult. And if you're going to do something long that's a one-off and not a series, something you can separate into smaller books, then that's really hard. I like to think sometimes there's, like, when you see some of those books that are out there that are long, it's because an author has already earned their readership, and their readership is willing to listen to that person at that length. In other words, they get to do something that you don't get to do because they've already sort of earned that. No, it's not always the best thing. All right, let me see. I'm looking on Twitter to see if there's anything else there. No, okay. Going back to Google Hangouts, we have a few minutes left. Let me look at some other questions here. Okay to say that you're approaching. Yeah, you already asked me that question. Okay, here we go. Question in the Q&A. Another on the side panel. Questions from Twitter. Okay, here we go. If the novel starts with a prologue, should the sample pages include it or start at chapter 1? That's a good question. You should definitely start with what would be first in your book, and that is therefore the prologue. Now I'm going to give you some personal editorial advice. Consider whether you need that prologue. I know there are prologues that are out there, and I know there are prologues that work, but I think the vast majority of prologues that I see, so this is, again, something very personal in terms of thoughts, I think the vast majority of prologues that I see are actually sort of fear in the reader Like, because what is a prologue? A prologue is taking a chunk from the middle of the book, usually, or an action scene, and putting it right in front of you, so that you can be excited about the book. Sometimes it's because you don't have faith necessarily in leading right in. And again, there are plenty of prologues that are important. Thousand Names, Django's book, has a prologue. And what that did is it established sort of the world build and some of the other side of the coin that was coming. So that it was very important. But a lot of the stuff that I get that have prologues they're not needed, and I actually think less of a book because of that. Okay, here's another question from Evergreen Lee. If the guidelines don't specify, should the sample chapters be attached or inside the query email? That's a good question. In the early days of email, well, I've been doing this for 10 years, and not 6 years ago we were printing out everything. I still preferred hard copy. I used to always still say that, by the way. I no longer prefer hard copy. I mean, I do, but I'll make the choice about printing it. So send me electronic. Excuse me. If it doesn't specify, you should attach it. In the beginning, everything we were worried about viruses and stuff, but we're not really worried about that anymore. So yeah, attach it. That's fine. Though sometimes you don't have to attach it all, and you ask if you want to take a look at it. If you put it in the email, I never look at it that way. I'm sure some people do, but I find it to be a little tedious. I mean, I can look at it, but I usually just ask you for pages. Go over the Q&A. So we go here. Okay, how do I approach searching for an agent when I'm not sure of my genre? I feel like I'm bending so many genres, it's difficult to find the right agent. You already asked that question, I answered it. Okay, sorry, here's a different question. Do you have an example of a query that stuck with you over the years, something in particular that stuck with you? I have. That's a great question. Obviously, the answer seems to be no, but it's not. There was something that came to me really recently, which made me feel really proud. When I was an assistant at Sterling Lord, I would read queries for my boss, and if I thought it was good enough, I would pass it on to my boss, and if he or she rejected it, if I really liked it, then sometimes I would write some notes on it myself. Keep trying. This was very close for me, so on and so forth. So I must have done that with a author named Xander Miller, because he queried me when I was 6 years later, when I was a full agent, and with a totally different book. But he said he remembered that note, and that made me feel really nice that that worked out. And I read his book, and his book was amazing. I sold it in a preempt to Knopf, and it's called Z-O, and it comes out in about a year or so. It's really fantastic. It's a Haitian love story set during and in the middle of the earthquake. Yeah, and that's one that stuck out to me. A little bit different than your answer that you were talking about, but yeah. Okay, let's see here. Let me look at some other stuff here. I also want to thank World Builders for all your help setting this up. I think we have time for something like one or two more questions, so let's look to see. If you have an intention of writing a trilogy or an extended series, how focused should you be on selling that first book alone? Should you even mention? Okay, yeah, you should mention that to your agent, and your agent will work with you on how to do that. When I sell trilogies, what I usually like to do, I make people work pretty hard on it. I want a full, complete manuscript, and then for every book afterwards, I want a pretty detailed synopsis, because again, I think the more the merrier. And I send it to publishers, and publishers sometimes bid on one, sometimes bid on three, sometimes bid on more than that. Like Django, for instance, we sold 3 books out of the 5. I didn't want to sell 5. I only wanted to sell 3. And we just recently re-upped and sold the next 2. So happily, we can say that we have all 5 books in the series coming, which is great. Okay, let's see here. All right, let's see if we have any final questions. And no worries if you had asked a question and I had You hadn't seen what I had already said. Okay, let me see. Any final ones? Um, Regardless, you guys are great. These are really great questions. And I think it's important to remember, you do keep writing. It's really, I'm a writer. I know about this as well. This is a dream of all of ours to do. I think it's really important to remember that rejection is part of the process. This is the only industry I know of where there's a lot of different forms of rejection. Um, and you just have to keep plugging away and finding the right person. And if you find your agent, you can then not sell your book. That happens. Like, there's all sorts of different levels to this. But if you believe in it, then you just keep trying. And it's something that's really important to remember is that writing is a skill. Like, you can be naturally talented at it, but even naturally talented people at running still need to practice to get better. And it's the same with this. The more you write, the better you're going to get. And that's just a fact. So make sure that you continue writing. I think one other question came in. Where did it go? Where did it go? I'm lying to you all. I'm lying to you all. I'm just doing one refresh of the page just to make sure. Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys so much for paying attention. I'll plug my own book because what kind of agent could I be? I wrote a book called The Well's End. Book 2 is coming out, The Dark Water. For those of you who like geeky movies, it's like the Toy Soldiers meets Outbreak, the first one. Kind of fun. But I think what's really important to remember here, of course, is World Builders, this fantastic organization that I'm working with this. I was a stretch code before that Patrick Roth has set up. There's a lot of great people working on this. Thank you to Amanda so much for setting this up, and Maria as well, and Django Wexler for coming in. Fantastic to see you. And go donate and get some free great goodies. My books are there that are for auction or in the lottery, and you have a great chance of seeing and getting some wonderful stuff. And really wish you the best of luck. If you want to query me, I look forward to seeing your material. And yeah, I hope you have a good night. Thank you so much.